Anil had to say about the Ratnagiri power plant. Anil Razdan, former power secretary, joining now on the phone line from Gurgaon. Mr. Razdan, you heard power minister's comments. Of course, this is a much needed and much welcome move. But could you get some clarity as to how this would work out in terms of the timeline? How it would, because we were expecting the demerger eventually. But how would this work out in terms of a roadmap ahead?
You see, this demerger proposal is nothing very new.
Yeah.
I think way back in 2007 or so also, there was a proposal to probably hive off the LNG terminal. Essentially, I think coming from maybe the banker's side, from the lender's side. Now, at the moment, you see, because of lack of gas, the Dabhol plant, which had begun to function very well and efficiently, and was making profits, has now plunged into dire straits because of lack of gas availability. I think the basic problem that we have to address is that we've got to get gas at a reasonable supply to be able to cover about 50 to 60% PLF in the plant. So that is as far as the generating plant is concerned. As far as the LNG business is concerned, that could probably, yes, be hived off at the moment sensibly into another venture so that it can get the funding, etc., and its support, and can be self-supporting in its own way. Because it will need, I think, deepening of the approach to be able to get vessels between the monsoon season so that it can operate profitably. So I think at the current juncture, it seems to be the right thing to do so that at least the LNG portion can start generating some profits from the terminal. But I think we need to arrange more gas for the plant so that it can operate at about 50 to 60% PLF of its entire capacity.
Sure.
The third point, I think, which is rather sensible at the moment on the part of the Maharashtra authorities, is that they would have allowed the railways, probably what I was hearing, to get power from the plant directly. Normally, the state electricity boards or the companies are very reluctant to allow a major customer and a paying customer like railways to get power directly. So if Dabhol is able to supply power directly to the railways, I think it's a win-win situation for the railways and also for a distressed plant. So I think on two counts at least, it's a very positive side at the moment, as I can see in the given situation.
Sir, the minister's briefing gave out a broad framework, but it was a little short on specific details that we'll only get, I think, once the actual documents come out. But let me throw the proposed numbers at you at least, so the numbers that were doing the rounds. The expectation was the plant received about 2 million units of gas via the government's stranded gas power policy, which was, of course, unveiled only earlier this year. And I believe that the thought was that the plant should aim to sell power at somewhere around ballpark 6.5 rupees per unit. And the railways were supposed to pick up power at around 4.7 rupees per unit. Are all these calculations within sensible realm? And also, if the railway does pick up the intended 500 megawatts of power, will this plant reach the 50% PLF that you said would be quite critical to actually get it back up and running?
Well, I think firstly, I think the railways deal, in my opinion, should be ending at about 4.70 and not above that. Secondly, I think the amount of gas that they probably would get would only cover about 350 megawatts, which will not be enough. They need to get much more gas to be able to ramp up their capacity quite substantially. I think they need to at least go up 2 to 3 times the present allocation. So that is as far as making the power plant viable on its own. But be that as it may, I think it makes perfectly good sense to make the LNG terminal a viable one, because they were not able to get the required draft for 6 months of the year. So I think if they need an investment, maybe about 1,000 crores or something like that, then the major partners there, I think, should be able to probably put in the equity if it's a profitable venture.
Sir, totally take your point, but I think that was one of the biggest sticky issues with the LNG company or the LNG business, because some of the equity partners or the holders, the shareholders, were not too keen on putting in this additional equity, some of the companies including NTPC, for the dredging operations to make it a 12-month full year-round LNG terminal. But just to get back to the drawing board in terms of the basic power business itself, what are the sort of numbers that you would work with in terms of the price at which this plant would be in a position to sell power? And then the question, we have an issue with discoms around this country, which the central government is right now trying to fix. Would discoms, at what price do you think would discoms be able to offtake that power?
You see, discoms are only picking up power, but probably looking at lower prices, looking at exchange rates. But I think to find a customer in railways is, I think, a very good idea, because railways in any case would not have been getting power at less than this price, because they tend to go to the commercial side of it, and as tariff issues go. So I think that way, if the railways can pick up more power, or you see when renewable power comes up and you need gas-based power for balancing that power, the intermittent power, then Dabhol plant would certainly look at, I think, rosier days to come. So I would be seriously looking at the corresponding increase in the renewables, new renewables capacity coming up in the western zone, that this capacity should go up to 2-3 times.
All right, Mr. Razdan, just hang in there for a second. We also have R.V. Shahi, the former Power Secretary, joining us on the phone line. Mr. Shahi, just to get a quick initial reaction from you, what are the questions that are now left unsaid? Clearly, there are some fine print and some details that need to be disclosed. So what would you ask the Power Minister specifically as to clarity as to what you would need to know to see that turnaround actually taking place?
I think Dabhol has been one of our earliest IPP projects, and I had occasion to restructure this in 2005-06, and we did it because right from 2001-02 it was closed, and we had, with the cooperation of Gas Authority of India, NTPC, the ICICI Bank, SBI, and all others, we did a restructuring, and it worked for some time. But because of gas non-availability, it again got into problem. Now, because of this pooling arrangement which Ministry of Power has been able to do along with the Petroleum and Natural Gas Ministry, it has been possible to run many of the gas-based power stations. I think this is a good arrangement, that if railways could buy power, because railways' cost of procurement of power is one of the highest. And in fact, I am advising also the railway board, Mr. Suresh Prabhu asked me, that how to minimize the cost of procurement of power. So I think so long as it is much less than the rate at which they are buying from different distribution companies across the country, it should be a win-win situation. And by this process, we should be able to revive this power plant. I mean, sentimentally, to keep this power station closed, even after restructuring that we did in 2005-06, would not have been good for the sector. Of course, the sector has many other problems, but the solution which the Power Minister seems to have provided, details will be worked out further.
Sure.
It seems to be quite good, and we should be happy about it.
Mr. Shahi, sir, two very quick questions. One, I believe that Ratnagiri Gas and Power managed to receive around 2 units of gas after the government's policy earlier this year. If you would have some sense of, at what sort of plant load factor would this power plant become operational? It's supposed to start in November. That's what the minister has said today. So what sort of an initial PLF would the plant be working with? And you mentioned the railways, because, I mean, they're really the knight in shining armor in this story. So at around 4.7, which seems to be the proposed price, is it beneficial? Is that price beneficial both to the power seller, that's the Dabhol Power Company, as well as the Indian Railways?
Yeah, I think 4.7 would be quite workable. But I may also tell you that of late, because of crude price going down substantially, it was more than 100, it's in the range of 50. And crude price also influences the gas LNG price. So I think in coming months and for quite some time, it should be possible to procure LNG at cheaper price, and in which case even 4.7 will have to be relooked into. And in that situation, it should be possible to get power even at cheaper rates than we are thinking now. Because this formula was being worked out when gas price was or LNG price was still very high.
Let me, sir, sorry to intervene over there. As we speak now, we know that gas prices in the country are going to go down starting midnight tonight, and the overall local domestic gas prices would be somewhere around 4.2. How would that, have an impact, cascading impact, as this gas-based power plant continues firing up? I know they've only got that limited supply till now, but as we're looking at pooling going forward, how do you expect the price of gas to behave for Ratnagiri Gas and Power? Because we know the next 6 months, the price is much lower because of the way global prices have behaved.
Correct. Now, see, gas price domestic going to 4.2 and even higher later on. The question is, we don't have gas in the country today. Out of 25,000 megawatts of gas-based plant that we have, the capacity utilization is hardly 30%. And that is how this formula was worked out. What I'm trying to say that in last 1 year, maybe less than 1 year, the behavior of gas price influenced by crude, we should look into. And in that case, it will be possible that to source LNG at cheaper rates. And in that case, not only Ratnagiri, many other gas plants would be reworked. But so far as Ratnagiri is concerned, this revival approach for the present is very good. Even at 4.2 or 5 or something like that, it would be workable for railway. But in coming months, it should be possible to source cheaper LNG, which should influence the price of power substantially.
All right, Mr. R.V. Shahi, Anil Razdan, thank you so much for joining in on CNBC TV 18. Pleasure to have you with us. A lot of questions remain unanswered, but all in all, watch out for those 4 stocks that we pointed out: NTPC, ICICI buying, IDBI and SBI. Anything I'm missing out, Surabhi?
I think that's pretty much it. Some good news at least coming in for Ratnagiri Gas and Power.
Absolutely. With that, completely out of time. Thank you so much.